Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. It's a familiar spot for me, kind of my hiding spot. I was just here right before making this video, and I had performed a daily banishing exercise. First, I performed the, lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, followed by the greater ritual of the hexagram, then followed by the middle pillar ritual. And the middle pillar ritual is one of those ones that I know that ritual. Not one of those things that I commonly practice. I practiced it right now, and as I was vibrating into my throat, I found on my exhale as I was vibrating Yod Vov He Elohim, I felt a surge go down my arms, and my hands began to tingle and became numb. And I thought that was very bizarre. It felt numb, like tingling, like how if your leg falls asleep or you're sitting on your hand and your hand starts to tingle. Both my hands did that. But I ignored it, and I traced the vibration down to my heart, and I began vibrating Yod He Vov He Elov Eldath, and the hands were really tingling. And I decided to, as I exhaled the name, to visualize fresh, warm blood pumping out of my heart, down my arms, and filling my hands up. And in the process of doing that, it dispelled the tingling in my hands, which was very interesting, as an interesting physical phenomenon while performing ritual. Worth reporting. I thought I would take this opportunity to discuss my introduction to Thelema and why I subscribe to Thelema. I personally find that it's hard to know where to start with that, because I'll start with the background. When I first started researching into the occult, you can't become an occult researcher without coming across Aleister Crowley. It won't happen. He was extremely influential for his time, and to this day. And the more you research Crowley, the more you just start to learn, like, who was this fucking guy? Like, how was one person capable of achieving so much in one lifetime? Seriously. And he created his own system from bottom to top to bottom. So for me, it felt like I don't know, it just, the concept, like the motif of Thelema resonated with me. And I had no fear of any of the wickedest man in the world, or satanic rituals, or evil invocations, or demon summoning, any of these things that scare most of the people away from Crowley and Thelema. Didn't bother me. I'm not superstitious. I'm curious. And in my heart, I honestly am seeking good. And in my heart, I am honestly seeking light. And in the process of doing that, understanding is, if you're experimenting and searching in those things, and it takes you down those certain avenues, it's your intention, it's what you're going, like, it's that cliche, knives don't kill people, people kill people. You know, like, you can use a knife for cutting fruit, you can use a knife for carving a toy, you can use a knife for stabbing someone in the heart. That's the same with the occult, really. It's a concept, it's a tool. So, long story short, I discovered a YouTuber by the name of Mark Passio, and I found that he really just cut the fat, went right to the point. He was spitting the juice. He's very opinionated. He has a concept that he's trying to get across. Whether you subscribe to that concept or not is for yourself to determine. But when it comes to him sharing his actual understanding of the topics, I feel that he's renowned right now. So he did a couple of interviews where he gave the gist of Crowley and Thelema, and he helped me understand Thelema and Crowley enough that I was comfortable pursuing it on my own. And I began researching and studying. I read Crowley, I read the Book of the Law, I read Book of Lies, I read a bunch of other shit. I was watching nonstop videos online, got into the Equinox, was reading the Equinox, and then it just got to the point where like you're reading things that are referencing people and organizations and practices that you can read it forever, but it's meaningless until you experience it. So I happened to be in a city that had an OTO lodge. I decided to go and be a congregant in the Gnostic Mass. And after that, it became a ritual for me where I was going all the time. I went to the Mass a dozen times and met the people there, learned the ritual, fell in love with the ritual. The Gnostic Mass is beautiful. It's one of those rituals where every time you perform it or watch it or observe it or study it, it's a different ritual. It's beautiful. And then I bit the bullet and I signed a initiation document, and I was initiated into Minerval, and I've gone through several of the initiations of the OTO, all the way up into being the master of a camp. I'm a master of a camp right now in my city. Why Thelema though? Like, the point is, that's kind of like my personal experience with organizations and the background, but why Thelema? And for me, Thelema is mysterious and it's straightforward. Thelema is an example of what one could create as their own interpretation of the universe, and a system and modality of operation based on that interpretation. That's one way of looking at it. You can also take it as literal, channeled, received, supernatural documents. I don't know which of those answers is true. In seeking, always remain skeptical. And whether or not Thelema is a psychological experiment, whether or not it's a spiritual experiment, whether or not it's a metaphysical quantum experiment, I think it's all of those. It's 100% all of those. I don't think you can subscribe to any one. I think everyone enters it from one of those angles and then discovers the other two in the process. It's very interesting. It's very empowering. Crowley wrote the Book of the Law in 1904, and at the declaration of the Book of the Law and Rahor Kui claiming his rightful place on the throne, the crowned and conquering child, almost immediately after that, a handful of years later, the world fell into the largest war that has ever existed up until that point. After the Great War, occult societies really started flourishing, and it really is occult concepts that came to arise in Germany again, forcing the rise of the Third Reich. The Third Reich is extremely occult. It's heavily occult. All the symbology, the motives, the modalities. If they weren't so evil, if they hadn't tried to achieve something so evil, I would have nothing but beautiful remarks for the Third Reich. Like their motifs, their modalities, their art, their pride, their will, their achievements. It's a blinding light of human accomplishment. The Third Reich. What it came at the cost of was horrific. I don't need to explain the perils of the Nazi Third Reich here. It's obvious, but very interesting. And the interplay of Crowley and the Nazis in World War II is a very interesting topic, if that's something that you've never discovered or learned. So there's these crazy events that have happened since the writing of the Book of the Law and the explosion of technology since then. And since the Book of the Law, the focusing on the individual. Our culture has become obsessed with individual liberties and individual rights and individual expression, and not being refined to any one thing and having the whole world open to you. That's very Thelema. That's very Thelema. Another thing that you see is the fall of the church. The church, people standing up for the church nowadays, especially in the days of COVID, it's becoming like the tables have turned on the church, and you can see the church on a downcline. And there's people who present the church, and it almost seems silly nowadays, the way it's presented. Just a few weeks ago, or a month or two ago, in Canada, on Canada Day, the Aboriginals went around and started burning all the churches in an uprising against the Catholicism and what the Catholics did in Canada with the residential schools and such. I think the fall of the church is a very Thelemic thing. It's not being driven by Thelemites. It's not being driven by the Book of the Law. It's just another indication that this is the new way on, Things are changing. The interest in personal spirituality and personal interpretation and mingling of philosophical, spiritual practices and finding your own path. That's very Thelemic as well. And the explosion in esotericism and the occult and magic. But I think that none of that needs to be Thelemic. There was a period of my Thelemic career so far where it kind of ran out of gas on me, and I put it down, and I became very, very intrigued with chaos magic and the whole concept of chaos. And Peter Carroll's writings, I think that shit's super intense and really, really, really fucking cool, man. I really subscribe to that. But the one thing I will say about chaos theory is it is chaotic, and I found that it can put you into a state of chaos yourself. And even though that's kind of the point, I guess, maybe, the whole, at its core, kind of gets summed up. People summarize chaos theory or chaos magic as nothing is real, everything is permitted. And I think that may be a valid statement. However, that eradicates morals and ethics and unification and solidarity, really. it becomes chaotic. It can make the individual chaotic. It can make the individual, to me, it almost subscribes to nihilistic, atheist kind of ideals. And there's not that there's anything wrong with that per se. If that's how you subscribe or identify, there's nothing improper with that. For me personally, it came to a point where I was having success with chaos magic, but let's say dogma, let's call it the dogma of the chaos religion, let's call it that, just for ease of interpretation, the dogma of chaos theory was kind of making me empty. It was kind of dispelling my will, my true will. And without even trying, Thelema just came charging right back into my life in a very profound way. I moved to a new city, and the OTO, someone from the old OTO, recommended that I reach out to a young man in this town who was the master of he was starting a camp. And I reached out to him. I was several degrees higher than him, several years older than him, but I'm very busy with my life and my kids, and I'm like, but I will join with you and help you and support you with this endeavor. Very shortly after that, and he had no charter for initiation or anything like that, and in a very short amount of time I was chartered for initiation, and he moved out of the city and left the camp, and the camp just suddenly became mine. So within the first year of moving here, effortlessly I received my initiation charter and a camp, and out of nowhere. And in the process of receiving all of that, I resubscribed to brushing back up on my Thelema, and that void, that hole that I was describing, that I kind of stirred in myself with chaos magic, immediately got filled with Thelema. And just rushed through my veins and filled my blood with love again. That's what I was missing with the chaos magic, was the love. Because chaos magic, nothing is real, everything is permitted. Thelema, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law. Love under will. What Thelema does for me is invokes in me a drive to pursue my highest potential, my highest quality, my highest manifestation on this planet. What Thelema does for me is endows me with a motif that forces me, not forces me, but like force, but causes me to recognize the star in the center of every man and woman and child around me, and permit them the freedom and liberty to pursue their own highest quality, highest potential, their true will. And the law of Thelema, to me, is almost, it gives you the freedom of chaos magic with a gown, a rich royal crimson, voluptuous purple gown of respecting each other and respecting each other's will, and giving each other the love required for them to perform their own true wills in the process. It creates a ideology for mankind to operate in harmony. Does that mean peacefully? No. 100% no. Does Thelema encourage war? I mean, if you read the third book, does it encourage fighting each other? Yes, actually it does. But not out of spite, not out of anger, not out of greed, not out of hate. Quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. Love is the law. Love under will. You know, this is one of those things I could ramble on again forever about, and I'm already at the 20-minute mark here, so I think that was just kind of me kind of off-gassing some real basic concepts of how I interpret Thelema and how I incorporate it into my life and how I differentiate it from specifically chaos magic. I'm going to leave it at there for now. Love is the law. Love under will.